Hello, hello, friends. We are here to read another few chapters of Goosebumps. Ooh, spooky. All right, so what happened in the last chapter? Greg went home and saw his dad had a new car, so he took a picture of it with the camera that he stole, found, whatever. He took a picture of it with the camera, and when the picture came out, the car was totaled. It was a hot mess. It was all busted up, broken glass, twisted metal. And then he looked back at the car and it was fine. What does that mean? And then his dad was like, let's go for a drive after dinner. And Greg was like, would you want to go for a drive in that car? I don't know. Anyway, let's jump back into chapter 9. This is great chicken, Mom, Greg's brother Terry said, chewing as he talked. Thanks for the compliment, Mrs. Banks said dryly, but it's veal, not chicken. Greg and his dad burst out laughing. Terry's face grew bright red. Well, he said, chewing, it's such excellent veal. It tastes as good as chicken. I don't know why I bothered to cook, Mrs. Banks sighed. Mr. Banks changed the subject. How are things at the dairy freeze? He asked. We ran out of vanilla this afternoon, Terry said, forking a small potato and shoving it whole into his mouth. He chewed it briefly, then gulped it down. People were annoyed by that. I don't think I could go for the ride, Greg said, staring down at his dinner, which he'd hardly touched. I mean, why not? His father asked. Well, Greg searched his mind for a good reason. He needed to make one up, but his mind was blank. He couldn't tell them the truth, that he'd taken a snapshot of Michael and it showed Michael falling. Then a few seconds later, Michael had fallen. And now he had taken a picture of the new car and the car was wrecked in the photo. Greg didn't really know what it meant, but he was suddenly filled with this powerful feeling of dread, of fear, of... He didn't know what. A kind of troubled feeling he'd never had before. But he couldn't tell any of them that. It was too weird. Too crazy. I made plans to go to Michael's, he lied, staring down at his plate. Well, call him and tell him you'll see him tomorrow, Mr. Banks said, slicing his veal. That's no problem. Well, I'm kind of feeling not very well either, Greg said. What's wrong? Mrs. Banks asked with instant concern. Do you have a temperature? I thought you looked a little flushed when you came in. No, Greg replied uncomfortably. No temperature, I just feel kind of tired and not very hungry. Can I have your chicken? I mean, veal? Terry asked eagerly. He reached his fork across the table and nabbed the cutlet out of Greg's plate. Well, a nice ride might make you feel better, Greg's dad said, eyeing Greg suspiciously. You know, some fresh air. You can stretch out in the back if you want. But Dad... Greg stopped. He had used up all the excuses he could think of. They would never believe him if he said he needed to stay home and do homework on a Saturday night. You're coming with us, and that's final, Mr. Banks said, still studying Greg closely. You've been dying for this new wagon to arrive. I really don't understand your problem. Neither do I, Greg thought to himself. I don't understand it at all. Why am I so afraid of riding in the new car? Just because there's something wrong with that stupid camera? I'm being silly, Greg thought, trying to shake away the feeling of dread that had taken away his appetite. Okay, Dad, great, he said, forcing a smile. I'll come. Are there any more potatoes? Terry asked. Chapter 10. It's so easy to drive, Mr. Banks said, accelerating onto the empty ramp of the freeway. It handles like a small car, not like a station wagon. Plenty of room back here, Dad, Terry said, scooting low in the back seat beside Greg, raising his knees to the back of the front seat. Hey, look, there's a drink holder that pulls out from the dash, Greg's mother exclaimed. That's neat. Awesome, Mom, Terry said sarcastically. Well, we never had a drink holder before, Mrs. Banks replied. She turned to the back to the two boys. Are your seatbelts buckled? Do they work properly? Yeah, they're okay, Terry replied. They checked them at the showroom before I took the car, Mr. Banks said, signaling to move into the left lane. A truck roared by, spitting a cloud of exhaust behind it. Greg stared out the front window. His door window was still covered by the new car sticker. Mr. Banks pulled off the freeway into a nearly empty 4-lane highway that curved towards the west. The setting sun was a red ball low on the horizon in a charcoal gray sky. "Put the pedal to the metal, Dad," Terry urged, sitting up and leaning forward. "Let's see what this car can really do." Mr. Banks obediently pressed his foot on the accelerator. "The cruising speed seems to be about 60, he said. "Slow down," Mrs. Banks scolded. "You know the speed limit is 55. "I'm just testing it," Greg's dad said defensively. "You know, making sure the transmission doesn't slip or anything." Greg stared at the glowing speedometer. They were doing 70 now. "Slow down, I mean it," Mrs. Banks insisted. "You're acting like a crazy teenager." "That's me," Mr. Banks replied, laughing. "This is awesome," he said, imitating Terry, ignoring his wife's pleas to slow down. They roared past a couple of small cars in the right lane. Headlights of cars moving towards them were bright white blur in the darkening night. "Hey, Greg, you've been awfully quiet," his mother said. "You feeling okay?" "Yeah, I'm okay," Greg said softly. He wished his dad would slow down. He was doing 75 now. "What do you think, Greg?" Mr. Banks asked, steering with his left hand as his right hand searched the dashboard. "Where's the light switch? I should turn on my headlights." "The car's great," Greg replied, trying to sound enthusiastic, but he couldn't shake away the fear. Couldn't get the photo of the mangled car out of his mind. "Where's that stupid light switch? It's gotta be here somewhere," Mr. Banks said. As he glanced down at the unfamiliar dashboard, the station wagon swerved to the left. "Dad, look out for the truck!" Greg screamed. Horns blared. A powerful blast of air swept over the station wagon like a giant ocean wave, pushing it to the side. Mr. Banks swerved the station wagon to the right. The truck rumbled past. "Sorry," Greg's dad said, eyes straight ahead, slowing the car to 60, 55, 50. "I told you to slow down," Mrs. Banks scolded, shaking her head. "We could have been killed." "I was trying to find the lights," he explained. "Oh, here they are. On the steering wheel." He clicked on the lights. "You boys okay?" Mrs. Banks asked, turning to check them out. "Yeah, fine," Terry said, sounding a little shaken. The truck would have hit his side of the car. "I'm okay," Greg said. "Can we go back now?" "Don't you want to keep going?" Mr. Banks asked, unable to hide his disappointment. "I thought we'd keep going to Santa Clara, stop and get some ice cream or something." "Greg's right," Mrs. Banks said softly to her husband. "Enough for tonight, dear. Let's turn around." "The truck didn't come that close," Mr. Banks argued, but he obediently turned off the highway and they headed for home. Later, safe and sound in his room, Greg took the photograph out of his dresser and examined it. There was the new station wagon. The driver's side caved in, the windshield smashed and shattered. "Weird," he said aloud and placed the photo in a secret compartment in his headboard where he had stashed the camera. "Definitely weird." He pulled the camera out of its hiding place and turned it around in his hands. "I'll try to take it one more time," he decided. He walked to his dresser and aimed at the mirror above it. "I'll take a picture of myself in the mirror," he thought. He raised the camera, then changed his mind. That won't work, he realized. The flash will reflect back and it'll spoil the photo. Gripping the camera in one hand, he made his way across the hall to Terry's room. His brother was at his desk, typing away on his computer keyboard, his face bathed in blue light of the monitor screen. "Terry, can I take your picture?" Greg asked meekly, holding up the camera. Terry typed some more, then looked up from the screen. "Hey, where'd you get that camera?" Sherry loaned it to me, Greg told him, thinking quickly. Greg didn't like to lie, but he didn't feel like explaining to Terry how he and his friends had sneaked into the Kaufman house and he had made off with the camera. So, can I take your picture? Greg asked. I'll probably break the camera, Terry joked. I think it's already broken, Greg told him. That's why I want to test it on you. Go ahead, Terry said. He stuck out his tongue and crossed his eyes. Greg snapped the shutter. An undeveloped photo slid out of the slot in front. Thanks, see ya. Greg headed to the door. Hey, don't I get to see it? Terry called after him. If it comes out, Greg said, and hurried across the hall to his room. He sat down on the edge of his bed, holding the photo in his lap. He stared at it intently as it developed. The yellows filled in first, then the reds appeared, followed by shades of blue. Whoa, Greg muttered as his brother's face came into view. There's something definitely wrong here. In the photo, Terry's eyes weren't crossed, and his tongue wasn't sticking out. His expression was grim, frightened. He looked very upset. As the background came into focus, Greg had another surprise. Terry wasn't in his room. He was outdoors. There were trees in the background and a house. Greg stared at the house. It looked familiar. Was that the house across the street from the playground? He took one more look at Terry's frightened expression. Then he tucked the photo and the camera into the secret headboard compartment and carefully closed it. The camera must be broken, he decided, getting changed for bed. It was the best explanation he could come up with. Lying in bed, staring at the shifting shadows on the ceiling, he decided not to think about it anymore. A broken camera was not worth worrying about. Tuesday afternoon, after school, Greg hurried to meet Sherry at the playground to watch Bird's Little League game. It was a warm fall afternoon, the sun high in a cloudless sky. The outfield grass had been freshly mowed and filled the air with its sharp, sweet smell. Greg crossed the grass and squinted into the bright sunlight, searching for Sherry. Both teams were warming up on the sides of the diamond, yelling and laughing. The sounds of balls popping into gloves, competing with their loud voices. A few parents and several kids had come to watch. Some were standing around, some were sitting in the low bleachers along the first baseline. Greg spotted Sherry behind the backstop and waved at her. Did you bring the camera? She asked eagerly, running over to greet him. He held it up. Excellent, she exclaimed, grinning. She reached for it. I think it's broken, Greg said, holding onto the camera. The photos just don't come out right. It's hard to explain. Maybe it's not the photos, maybe it's the photographer, Sherry teased. Maybe I'll take a photo of you getting a knuckle sandwich, Greg threatened. He raised the camera to his eye and pointed at her. Snap that and I'll take a picture of you eating the camera, Sherry threatened playfully. She reached up and quickly pulled the camera from his hand. What do you want it for anyway? Greg asked, making a heartfelt attempt to grab it back. Sherry held it away from his outstretched hand. I want to take Bird's picture when he comes to bat. He looks just like an ostrich at the plate. I heard that. Bird appeared beside them, pretending to be insulted. He looked ridiculous in his stretched white uniform. The shirt was too big, the pants were too short, the cap was the only thing that fit. It was blue, with a silver dolphin over the bill, and 2 words, Pitt's Landing Dolphins. What kind of name is Dolphins for a baseball team? Greg asked, grabbing the bill and turning the cap backwards on Bird's head. All the other caps were taken, Bird answered. We had a choice between the Zephyrs and the Dolphins. None of us knew what Zephyrs were, so we picked Dolphins. Sherry eyed him up and down. Maybe you guys should play in your street clothes. Thanks for the encouragement, Bird replied. He spotted the camera and took it from her. Hey, you brought the camera. Does it have film? Yeah, I think so, Greg told him. Let me see. He reached for the camera, but Bird swung it out of his grasp. Hey, are you going to share this thing, Greg? He said. Huh? What do you mean? Greg reached again for the camera and then Bird swung it away from him. I mean, we all risked our lives down in that basement getting it, right? Bird said. We should all share it. Well, Greg hadn't thought about it. I guess you're right, Bird. But I'm the one who found it, so... Sherry grabbed the camera out of Bird's hand. I told Greg to bring it so we could take your picture when you're up. As an example of good form? Bird asked. As a bad example, Sherry said. You guys are just jealous, Bird replied, frowning, because I'm a natural athlete and you can't cross the street without falling on your face. He turned the cap back around to the front. Hey, Bird, get back here, one of the coaches called from the playing field. I've got to go, Bird said, giving them a quick wave and starting to trot back to his teammates. No, wait, let me take a picture really fast now, Greg said. Bird stopped, turned around, and struck a pose. No, I'll take it, Sherry insisted. She started to raise the camera to her eye, pointing it towards Bird, and as she raised it, Greg grabbed for it. Let me take it. At that moment, the camera went off, clicked, and then flash. An undeveloped photo slid out. Hey, why'd you do that? Sherry asked angrily. Sorry, Greg said. I didn't mean to. She pulled the photo out and held it in her hand. Greg and Bird came close to watch it develop. What the heck is that? Bird cried, staring hard at the small square as the colors brightened and took shape. Oh, wow, Greg cried. The photo showed Bird sprawled unconscious on his back on the ground, his mouth twisted open, his neck bent at a frightening angle, his eyes shut tight. And that's the end of chapter 11. Oh my goodness. Okay. So excited to read the next 2 chapters with you guys. I hope you're enjoying this book. Let me know and I will talk to you later. All right, goodbye.